Hello, everybody. This is Mark Blanton from the Real South Africa.
And I am Latasha Blanton, also with the Real South Africa.
And you guys are welcome to sunny South Africa. If this is your first time, this is your opportunity to come with Phil Scott with his channel.
And they will be here on March 16th through the 25th, 2022. The cost does include the flight, most meals, and your domestic flight in country from Johannesburg to Cape Town. The cost is $5,500 per person sharing and $6,150 for a person wanting a single room.
Now, at this point, you don't need any extra shots. The only thing you need to do is have a negative COVID test prior to you leaving. And then, of course, upon departure, we will get you another COVID test. And then that's it. So that's really all you need. And, of course, a passport.
So no shots, no vaccines, no nothing. Just get to South Africa. We'll see you here.
So the federal trial for the 3 ex-race soldiers who watched and guarded against a crowd as Derek Chauvin kneeled on the neck of George Floyd for over 9 minutes until he died is underway. For their actions, the 3 were charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights. Now, according to the Associated Press, the prosecution came out swinging on the first day of the trial. Prosecutor Samantha Trepo accused former police officers K. Alexander Kung, they said Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao, they say, of standing by and allowing Chauvin to slowly kill George Floyd right in front of them. However, Kung's attorney, Tom Plunkett, saw it differently, alleging that Chauvin, their senior officer, called all the shots during the incident that took George Floyd's life. Now, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was detained by the former race soldiers on accusations of using a counterfeit $20 bill to buy cigarettes at Cup Food Store in the 3700 block of Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Surveillance footage showed the ex-cops engaging with him at different points and eventually trying to get him into their patrol vehicle. Floyd objected to being in the back of the seat of the police cruiser during the arrest and found himself removed from the car and handcuffed face down, with Chauvin pressing his knee onto his neck for 9.5 minutes. And we know, what happened to George Floyd, and the country just really it was an uprising behind that, and rightfully so. So, they said that the 46-year-old, George Floyd was gasping for air. Lane held his legs, Kung knelt on his back, and Tao kept the crowd from gathering, coming close to help George Floyd as he cried, choked, and called for his mom. Now, in opening statements, Trepo, who works for the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, said that for second after second, minute after minute, these 3 CPR-trained defenders stood and knelt next to Officer Chauvin as he slowly killed George Floyd right in front of them. They chose not to protect George Floyd, the man they had handcuffed and placed in their custody. She continued. Now, she also stated in her remarks that the 3 men watched as Mr. Floyd suffered a slow and agonizing death and didn't do anything to help save the man from another officer using excessive force. The prosecution painted the scenario for the court. On the ground under Chauvin's knee, Mr. Floyd said, "I can't breathe." He said not only once, not twice, he said, but 25 times he lay on the ground, and said after Mr. Floyd lost his ability to speak, he said the people on the sidewalk spoke for him. They watched in horror as they saw one officer forcing the breath out of Mr. Floyd and 2 other officers holding him down and one other standing by and keeping people away. Now, the 3 different legal teams approached their opening statements differently, setting up their clients with varying defense strategies. In addition to promising to show that Chauvin was telling everyone what to do that day, he said Plunkett used this time to criticize the Minneapolis Police Department for not training the officers properly, equipping them with the tools to intervene when the officer is out of control. Oh, come on now. They don't need no tools. You just stop him. That's the only thing you do. You need a special tool for that crap. I say one issue he was raised that Chauvin was his client's field training officer and had considerably sway over his career in the department. The next point he presented was that neither his client or Lane was trained by the department's policy on neck restraint. Lastly, he added that Lane, as the senior responding officer, Chauvin and Tao were backup responders, should have been in charge that day but relinquished control to Chauvin. Don't give me that. Oh, it's all him and it had nothing to do with me. And I worry about my career, so you'll watch a man die worrying about your career. Okay, well, what's your career now? You ain't got it no more, right? Now, the prosecution presented Kung very differently than his attorney. She focused on his participation in restraining Floyd. She noted how he knelt on Floyd for 8 out of the 9.5 minutes that Chauvin was kneeling on the victim, and that he didn't even find a pulse, still did not render aid. It said Robert Paul, Tao's representation, that Hmong American dude, opted to focus on George Floyd's resistance to being detained. Said Paul continued that while Floyd's death was tragic, it was not a crime because the man would not comply. Oh, if it wasn't a crime, then why Derek Chauvin's in prison? And he did get in prison because the people turned up. The people wasn't putting up with him, just going back to business as usual. Now, he states in the video that so many have seen of the altercation did not show a full, accurate account of the day's events. I love when they say that. Well, you didn't see everything that happened. They got surveillance cameras that showed the whole thing and even the video from the young sister. Now, the video capture was plenty for the prosecution. Said she heard him as he stood guard for Chauvin, saying the bystanders' remarks about his addiction. Now, instead of stopping Chauvin from killing Mr. Floyd, said Treppa presents to the jury in her statements about Tao, he turned the question about drugs into a taunt, saying to the crowd, "You see, kids, this is why you don't do drugs." Now, she noted that Tao, it said, did not heed the community's pleas to help the man or recognize the medical authority of an off-duty city firefighter who came over to help after witnessing Floyd in crisis. Now, Lane's attorney, said Earl Gray, presented his case, leading with defining his client as a gentle giant who tried to help Floyd. He said he noted that Lane couldn't clearly see what Chauvin was doing to Floyd, and at one point asked the superior officer if they could turn the man over. To that request, Chauvin would say no. So their defense is, oh, it's all Derek Chauvin. We had nothing to do with it. It's him. He was a supervising officer. You know, it was him. That's not going to work. As Treppa addressed that this is her in her statement, that she was intentional to point out that Floyd was restrained for 4 minutes before that request was made. She noted that rolling him to the side was something that Lane would have learned in training on the force. She noted that it was not Chauvin that said no, according to police body cam footage. Kung said, no, just leave him, and Chauvin agreed. Now, when duty required inaction, defendant Lane said nothing at all. It said defendant Lane didn't do anything. It said still Gray submits that his client called an ambulance, upgraded the call for help to the emergency status, and even got into the ambulance with the man, assisting the EMT workers by performing what he hoped would be life-saving chest compressions. Now, all three of them are charged for failing to give George Floyd medical care while he was in obvious trauma. Tao and Kung face another additional charge, not stopping Chauvin from kneeling on Floyd's neck. And the prosecutor asserts the actions or inaction of all three resulted in George Floyd's death. They said the prosecutor said, we will ask you to hold these men accountable for choosing not to do anything and watch a man die. These three need to go to prison as well for a very, very long time. I don't see how you can sit up there and watch Derek Chauvin do that. And I say, hey, you know, what are you doing? You remember the story with the woman that took a stand against her sergeant for trying to, because he was about to pepper spray a brother in the face that's handcuffed inside a police car. And remember, he grabbed her by the neck. And yeah, he got in trouble definitely for that. But this is, you know, how a lot of them are. You know, I'm not going to say anything. What you mean you're not going to say anything? Because you didn't say anything is why your city got turned up. Maybe if you would have said something and say, hey, all right, we got him, get off that man, or even push him off if you got to, right? Would have saved that whole city all that misery and pain. I told y'all, you got these race soldiers on the police departments, and they already know who they are. They cause so many problems for the police departments. And then they do something like this with the situation of George Floyd. Then you want to say, I don't know why the people are acting this way. You created that. If you would have stopped that fool years ago when he was doing things to people, it would have never got to that point. So I never feel bad for him when they get to that point. Because all you got to do is a little research on the main ones that people turning up about in the cities. They usually have a long record following them. But leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the situation here, about the trial with those other race soldiers. But yeah, like I said, they need to go to jail. Trust me, because they didn't do nothing to stop shopping.
Colonization never ended in the white supremacist system. And as we see today, the colonization is in the mind. Now, those who have been enslaved and those who have been colonized, we're still dealing with the remnants of that through the colonization of the mind. Pick up my book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, and we will help deprogram you from the colonization that was put upon you by generations and generations of white supremacy. You can pick it up today on Amazon.com.